Hello and welcome to the first edition of Pages, in which I will be talking about some of the many books I own, how they came into my life, what they mean to me, why I keep them, that sort of thing. Um, I'll probably just be rambling for the most part, but um, yeah, I hope you take some interesting things away from it. I'm hoping to also make blog posts to go with each of these, which will be linked in the show notes. So, without further ado, let's get on to the first item on my list, and that is The Diary of Samuel Pepys. In my case, I have the unabridged version. This particular edition is from 1942, published by, oh, now I can't remember, Heritage Press, that's it, in New York. So, it is an illustrated copy, and it has lots of footnotes in it. It was actually transcribed from the shorthand manuscript that lives in the Pepysian Library at Cambridge, which to me means that it is as close to the source material as you can get. So, the first version of these diaries was published in the 19th century. Um, he wrote them in the 1600s, specifically 1659 to 1669. And he just really kept them as a diary, as a record of his daily activities. Most of them start with what time of day he got up, whether he went into the office or stayed home, who he talked to through the day. It includes financials. He was fairly well to do. He was a member of parliament, and through patronage appointments, he ended up as chief secretary to the Royal Navy, which means that he had a lot of work about the finances and activities of the Navy in a pretty critical time for Britain. So, um, writing in the era that he wrote, it meant that he covered some pretty meaty historical events, including the plague as it ran through London in the mid 1660s, and the Great Fire of London, and a war or two. Um, Also, anything about politics or quite a number of artists and other sort of important persons in London. They get mentioned throughout the diary. Now, why do I care? I first encountered passages from this book in Literature 12 when I was in high school. And right after I was in grade 12, I went to England. I lived there for a year, and I took as much time as I could to visit London. And when I was there, I was always trying to track down landmarks from these diaries. It really had that deep of an impact on me and my concept of London, my concept of England. I think the fact that I kept diaries really meant that this diary resonated with me. The idea that maybe one day, 300, 400 years from now, someone would be reading my diary kind of weirds me out, but also made it feel like maybe I wasn't wasting all my time. I don't know that there's much content in my diaries, but that might be for future historians to sort out. So the writing in this is pretty stilted, but it is, and I don't recommend reading it front to back. It is full of various, very tedious and mundane entries in amongst all of the meaty stuff. So for me, my pleasure comes in just flipping through this and reading random entries. You could also get one of the abridged versions that has had some of the tediousness excised. But for example, because we're in a plague year ourselves, here is someone just dead in the street, and that is Pepys allegedly going about his business and walking past a dead person. He talks about it on the next page. Um, so this is on the 15th of August in 1665. It was dark before I could get home, and so land at Churchyard Stairs, which was the name of an alley in London, where, to my great trouble, I met a dead corpse of the plague in a narrow alley just bringing down a little pair of stairs. But I thank God I was not much disturbed by at it. However, I shall be aware of being late abroad again. So the fact that there are dead people just in the streets from the plague is a little bit nerve-wracking. He does get pretty nervous throughout here when people he knows start to die. He actually writes up his own will, um, gives his wife a diamond ring, which he's never done before. Just basically setting his affairs in order because he is quite worried. If you flip forward to September of 1666, we can see the Great Fire. And it begins on September 2nd, and it raged for several days. So his maids actually stayed up watching the fire in the wee hours and told them in the morning to say that there's a great fire in the city. So he gets up and looks out the window and decides it's far enough away that he doesn't need to panic. So he goes back to bed. About 7, rose again to dress myself, and there looked out the window and saw the fire not so much as it was, and further off. So to my closet to set things to rights after yesterday's cleaning. By and by Jane comes and tells me that she hears above 300 houses have burned down tonight by the fire we saw, and that is now burning all Fish Street by London Bridge. So I made myself ready presently and walked to the tower, and there got up on one of the high places. And there I did see the houses at that end of the bridge all on fire, an infinite great fire on this and the other side, the end of the bridge, which among other people did trouble me, for poor little Mitchell and our Sarah on the bridge. So down with my heart full of trouble to the lieutenant of the tower, who tells me that it begun this morning in the King's Baker House in Pudding Lane, and that it hath burned St. Magnus's Church and most part of Fish Street already. So this just goes through in great detail how the fire spread. As you can understand, this is an invaluable historical resource, basically an eyewitness account of the Great Fire of London, and you can't really replace that. So while I encountered this in my lit class, it really fits in with my life in history. I do recommend picking up a version of this. You can read it online. You can even go to Twitter. There's a Twitter account that tweets out Pepys's diary, one entry at a time, or part of an entry, because some of the entries are quite long. They are far more than the character's Twitter allows. There is also a fake Pepys account, which has gained headlines this year because nobody checks the internet for sources. So when he's writing about scoundrels not caring where they cough, and this seems like it might have been ripped from today's headlines, it actually was ripped from today's headlines. So yes, buyer beware. Make sure you're not following a satire account. Yeah, so that's Samuel Pepys. And if you liked this, I hope you'll come back and hit subscribe so that you get a reminder when I put another one of these up. If you didn't like it, Too bad there's going to be more anyway. You can just go find another YouTube channel. There's lots of them. And with that, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.